Question 3.8. After the solid benzoic acid has been filtered off, it can be purified. That's a process called recrystallization. Now, it's a common kind of question, this, and yet people lose marks again and again because they forget some of the 6 marks. Yet it's the same question again and again, and the process is the same throughout. Let's talk it through. Solid benzoic acid has been filtered off, it can be purified. So the idea is that you dissolve this in the minimum amount of a hot solvent so that it just dissolves, only just dissolves, so a minimum amount hot solvent. It just dissolves and any impurities won't dissolve and can be filtered off using reduced pressure filtration or vacuum filtration. Then when you've got the benzoic acid through in the hot solvent, you can cool that hot solvent and the crystals of benzoic acid cannot dissolve anymore because the solvent has been made cool and you've only just used the minimum amount. If you'd used too much, then they wouldn't recrystallize. But with the minimum amount of hot solvent, when you cool it down again, they'll come out of solution and crystallize, and then you can filter those off pure. At the end, it's important to wash it, so wash off any soluble impurities and dry it. Drying it means that the water is removed. Water is the main impurity. The other thing to remember is that you filter it whilst it's hot. If you don't filter it whilst it's hot, then some of the benzoic acid will start to recrystallize out if it's cold, and that will be retained in the filter paper. You don't want it in the filter paper, you want it dissolved in the hot solvent to come through the filter paper so that you can maximize the yield. Let's have a look then. So you dissolve the crude product, that's the benzoic acid, in the minimum amount of hot solvent. You don't need to mention water, you can just put hot solvent if you want. That's the liquid that's going to dissolve in. You filter it hot, and that will remove any insoluble impurities. Important that it's hot so that the benzoic acid doesn't start to recrystallize and end up in the filter paper. You want the insoluble impurities in the filter paper, and you want the benzoic acid dissolved in the minimum amount of hot solvent through the filter paper, so that when you cool that filtrate down, the liquid that's coming through the solvent and the benzoic acid, it will recrystallize. You've only used a minimum amount and you've used a hot solvent, so not too much. The minimum amount, and the hot solvent means when it cools down you will get a good yield of the benzoic acid. Then you can refilter it under reduced pressure filtration, vacuum filtration, and you'll lose 2 marks if you don't say wash with a cold solvent, because if you're washing a hot solvent it's going to dissolve again. You just want to wash out any soluble impurities and dry, because water will be the main impurity, and we'll see that in the next section of the question. In a similar experiment, another student used 0.4 mole of ethyl benzoate and obtained 5.12 grams of benzoic acid. So if I just flick back to the original bit of the question, 1 mole of ethyl benzoate makes 1 mole of benzoic acid. 1 mole of ethyl benzoate makes 1 mole of benzoic acid, but I haven't got 1 mole of ethyl benzoate, I've only got 0.04 moles of ethyl benzoate. So 0.04 moles of ethyl benzoate will make 0.04 moles of benzoic acid, the same amount. Moles equals mass over MR, so I can work out the MR of benzoic acid. I can work that out because I've got the formula of it in the original part of the question, and it will come out as 122. So moles equals mass divided by 122. Mass equals 0.04 times 122, which is 4.88 grams. Now that's the amount that I could make theoretically if I'd got 100%. So now then, what did I actually make? I made 5.12. I made more than it was possible to make. Now the only reason you could make more than it's possible to make, and the yield is 5.12, that's how much I did make, divided by 4.88 what I could make, multiplied by 100%, I've got 105%. The only reason that I can make more than I possibly could make is that there's some impurity in there, and the main impurity is water. the product wasn't dry or contained some water, and that's why it's important at the end to make sure it's dry. The easiest way to dry it, incidentally, is to press it between two filter papers.